Imagine a god so radiant, his light could heal the sick, spark courage in warriors, and ignite the very essence of spring. This is Belenus, the Celtic god of the sun, healing, and hope. A deity whose name echoes through ancient stones and modern hearts. But who was Belenus, and why does his story still captivate us today? Grab a cozy seat, and let's journey into the heart of Celtic mythology to uncover the brilliance of Belenus. Welcome, history buffs and mythology lovers, to a deep dive into the world of Belenus, one of the most revered gods in ancient Celtic culture. Known as the Shining One, Belenus wasn't just a sun god, he was a symbol of life, renewal, and divine power. In this video, we'll explore his origins, his role in Celtic society, his connections to other mythologies, and why his legacy still burns bright. From sacred springs to fiery festivals, we're about to unravel a story that's as warm as a summer's day and as mysterious as a druid's chant. So, let's get started. Belenus, often called the Bright One, or Shining One, was a major deity in the Celtic pantheon. His name likely comes from the Proto-Celtic root, bello, meaning bright or shining. Think of him as the Celtic equivalent of a solar superhero, radiating warmth, vitality, and healing. But Belenus wasn't just about sunshine. He was a multifaceted god, associated with healing springs, prophecy, and even pastoral life. The Celts, who thrived across Europe from roughly 1200 BCE to 400 CE, didn't leave behind many written records. So, piecing together Belenus's story is like solving a historical puzzle. We rely on archaeological finds, Roman accounts, and later medieval texts to understand him. Evidence of Belenus worship stretches from the British Isles to the Alps, and even into northern Italy. That's a pretty big fan club for a god whose light touched so many lives. One of the coolest things about Belenus, his name pops up in place names and inscriptions. Take Qui Beleni, a sacred spring in Roman Britain, or Belisama, a goddess, sometimes linked to him, whose name means most shining. These clues tell us Belenus was a big deal, not just to warriors or priests, but to everyday people seeking health and hope. His influence was so widespread that even the Romans, who loved syncing their gods with local ones, equated him with Apollo, their own god of the sun, healing, and prophecy. But was Belenus just a Celtic Apollo, or did he have a unique spark? Let's dive deeper. To understand Belenus, we need to step into the world of the Celts, a vibrant, spiritual people who saw divinity in rivers, trees, and, yes, the sun. Belenus was more than a glowing orb in the sky. He was a life-giver, a healer, and a protector. Imagine a Celtic farmer praying to Belenus for a bountiful harvest, or a warrior seeking his blessing before battle. His light was a symbol of strength and renewal. The Celts lived in a world where nature wasn't just scenery, it was sacred. Every hill, every spring, every sunrise carried a divine spark, and Belenus embodied that spark in its purest form. His radiance wasn't just physical, it was a spiritual force that warmed hearts and inspired courage. One of the biggest celebrations linked to Belenus was Beltane, the Celtic festival marking the start of summer, usually around May 1st. Beltane, which might derive from Belenus's name, was all about fire and fertility. Picture this: huge bonfires blazing across hilltops, people dancing, and livestock being driven between flames for purification. It was a time of joy, renewal, and connection to the divine. Families would gather, druids would chant, and the air would hum with the energy of new beginnings. Beltane wasn't just a party, it was a sacred moment to honor Belenus's life-giving power. The Celts believed his light could cleanse and renew, much like a cosmic reset button. Archaeological sites, like the hill forts of Britain or the sanctuaries of Gaul, show evidence of fire-based rituals, hinting at Belenus's central role. But Belenus wasn't only about fire, he was also tied to healing springs. The Celts revered natural springs as gateways to the divine, and many were dedicated to Belenus. People would visit these springs, leaving offerings like coins, jewelry, or even tiny carved figures, hoping for cures to ailments. These springs were like ancient wellness centers, where the sick sought Belenus's healing touch. Imagine a weary traveler, battered by life, kneeling by a bubbling spring, whispering prayers to the Shining One. It's a powerful image, isn't it? Some scholars even think Belenus's healing powers made him a patron of physicians. Inscriptions found in places like modern-day Austria show doctors dedicating altars to him, suggesting he was seen as a divine guide for those who mended bodies and souls. Let's talk about Belenus's personality, or at least, what we can guess about it. The Celts didn't write detailed myths like the Greeks, so we don't have epic tales of Belenus's adventures, but we can imagine him as a warm, benevolent figure, a god who smiled on his people like the sun on a spring morning. He wasn't a distant deity, aloof in the heavens. He was present, in the warmth of the sun, the flow of a spring, the crackle of a Beltane fire. His worshippers saw him as approachable, a god who cared about their daily struggles. That's what made him so beloved. Whether you were a chieftain or a farmer, Belenus was there, shining down on you. Now, let's shift gears and explore Belenus's Roman connection. When the Romans swept into Celtic lands, they didn't just conquer, they blended. This process, called interpretatio Romana, saw Roman gods merged with local deities. Belenus got paired with Apollo, and it's easy to see why. Both were sun gods, both were healers, and both had a knack for prophecy. Roman inscriptions often call him Apollo Belenus, showing how they tried to bridge the gap. Sites like Équerre in Italy or Saint-Sabin in France have altars dedicated to this hybrid god, proving Belenus's influence didn't fade under Roman rule. But this merger wasn't a perfect match. While Apollo was a polished, toga-wearing god of poetry and music, Belenus was more rugged, tied to the wild landscapes of Celtic Europe. His light wasn't just about beauty, it was about survival, about coaxing crops from the earth and strength from the weary. Some Romans were so into Belenus that they built grand sanctuaries for him, like the one at Saint Lazare in France. These weren't just shrines, they were like ancient wellness centers, complete with baths and healing spaces. People would travel miles to soak in Belenus's sacred springs, seeking cures for everything from fevers to broken hearts. It's like Belenus was the patron saint of self-care long before hashtags existed. But this Roman connection also raises questions. Did the Celts see Belenus the same way the Romans saw Apollo? Probably not. The Celts had a more animistic worldview, where gods weren't just in the sky, but in the land itself. Belenus's light was a spiritual force, binding communities together. That's what makes him so fascinating. He was both universal and deeply local. Belenus wasn't a local hero. He was a continental superstar. His worship spanned modern-day France, Britain, Ireland, Austria, and even northern Italy. Inscriptions and place names give us clues about his reach. The town of Belinby in France might trace its name to In Ireland, some scholars link him to a mythical figure tied to sacred trees in the underworld. In the Alps, a bronze statue of a god, possibly Belenus, was found, depicted with a solar crown. Think rays shooting out like a divine halo. It's a reminder that Belenus wasn't just a name on a stone. He was a vivid, powerful image in the Celtic imagination. His worship varied by region. In Gaul, he was a healer. In Britain, he might have been more of a pastoral protector. In Italy, he'd blended with Roman gods. This adaptability shows how the Celts tailored their gods to their needs, like a divine Swiss Army knife. Let's pause for a moment to picture Belenus in action. Imagine a Celtic village at dawn, the first rays of sunlight spilling over the hills. A druid stands atop a stone, arms raised, chanting to Belenus. As the community gathers, the air is crisp, the fire still smolders from last night's Beltane celebration, and there's a sense of hope, of new beginnings. That's the power of Belenus. Not just a god, but a feeling, a connection to something greater. His worship wasn't about grand temples or rigid rules. It was about community, nature, and the cycle of life. That's why his story resonates, even today. So, what happened to Belenus after the Romans left and Christianity spread? Like many pagan gods, he didn't vanish. He transformed. His association with Beltane lived on in folklore, and some Christian saints, like Saint Bridget, inherited his fiery, life-giving traits. Bridget, often linked to fire and healing, feels like a direct descendant of Belenus's energy. In medieval Ireland, stories of sacred wells and holy fires kept his spirit alive, even if his name faded. Fast forward to today, and Belenus is making a comeback in neo-pagan and Wiccan communities, where Beltane is still celebrated with bonfires and rituals. Modern pagans honor him as a symbol of light and renewal, a reminder that the old gods never truly die. They just wait for the right moment to shine again. Belenus also inspires artists, writers, and even gamers. Ever played a fantasy RPG with a sun god? there's a good chance Belenus was the inspiration. His themes of light, healing, and renewal resonate in a world that's always searching for hope. His story has been woven into novels, poems, and even music, where his radiant energy sparks creativity. There's something timeless about a god who brings warmth to a chilly day, who reminds us that even after the darkest winter, spring will come. Belenus's light is a metaphor for resilience, for the human spirit's ability to rise again. Let's explore one more angle: Belenus's connection to prophecy. Like Apollo, Belenus was sometimes seen as a god of foresight. Druids, the Celtic priests, were known for their oracular powers, and some sources suggest they invoked Belenus for divine insight. Imagine a druid gazing into a sacred spring, the water rippling with visions of the future, guided by Belenus's light. This prophetic aspect adds another layer to his character. He wasn't just about the present, but about hope for what's to come. It's a reminder that the Celts didn't just survive, they thrived by looking forward, guided by their gods. Another fascinating aspect is Belenus's possible link to other Celtic deities. Some scholars believe he might be connected to Lor, another Celtic god associated with light and skill. Others see parallels with Belisama, the most shining goddess, who might have been his consort or a female counterpart. These connections show how fluid Celtic mythology was. Gods weren't boxed into rigid roles, but flowed like the springs they protected. Belenus's story is part of a larger tapestry, woven with threads of light, fire, and life. Let's take a moment to reflect on why Belenus matters. In a world that often feels divided, his story reminds us of the power of connection between people, nature, and the divine. The Celts saw the world as interconnected, every part infused with spirit. Belenus was a bridge between the earthly and the divine, a reminder that even in tough times, there's light to be found. His festivals, his springs, his fires, they were all about bringing people together, about celebrating life's cycles. That's a lesson we can carry forward, whether we're lighting a candle or just basking in the sun. And there you have it, the radiant story of Belenus, the Celtic god who lit up the ancient world. From healing springs to blazing Beltane fires, his legacy is a testament to the Celts' deep connection to nature and the divine. Whether you're a history nerd, a mythology fan, or just someone who loves a good story, Belenus reminds us that light and hope are universal. What's your favorite part of Belenus's story? The fiery Beltane rituals, his Roman makeover, or maybe his modern revival? His light has shone for centuries, and it's still burning bright. Keep chasing that light, and let's keep exploring the stories that make our world so vibrant.